Wah wah! Cries echoed in the pitch-dark bedroom from a baby.
What's the matter, Sophia? Are you hungry?
Wah wah! Did Harper wake up too? Just as one goes to sleep, the other wakes up. And when both are awake, they both demand to be held. Since the twins were born, the days without sleep continued, and both my husband and I grew increasingly haggard. One morning, prompted by the sound of the doorbell, I opened the front door with sunken eyes. Unexpectedly, two people were standing there. Looking gloomy first thing in the morning. You're making it dreary over here too. You never bring the grandkids over, so I came to harass my daughter-in-law. Standing in the glittering morning sun with scowling faces were my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. I am Mia. A petite 36-year-old, not even 5 feet tall. My husband, James, is 2 years younger and a businessman. My in-laws run a well-known company locally. James is over 6 feet tall, and both his parents and sister are over 5 feet. So, whenever I visit my in-laws, I feel like I've become a dwarf. The kitchen is set up for my mother-in-law, so I can't even help properly. Moving around frantically without being able to do much, I guess they don't like me much. They always coldly tell me to sit down because I'm in the way. I want to get along with my husband's family, but I feel embarrassed and frustrated by my own uselessness. However, the in-laws don't meddle too much, so as long as we get through Thanksgiving and Christmas, there aren't any problems. My husband is calm and kind, so our marriage has been peaceful. However, everything changed when I became pregnant with twins. Twins are said to be a heavy burden on the mother. Additionally, I was an older mother, petite, and with a chronic condition making the risk too high. Even the doctors were concerned. We may not be able to save them, and you are at risk too, they told us, and my husband and I were in mourning, unable to enjoy our happiness. My parents thought twins were wonderful, surprisingly supportive, but my in-laws and sister-in-law were strongly against it. It's impossible for someone with your condition to give birth to twins. You should give up this time. After being berated, I returned home holding back tears. My husband was also swayed by the doctor's words that my life was in danger and was about to give up on the pregnancy. But I couldn't give up. I couldn't bear the thought of saving myself by giving up on the children who came to me. Resigned to being disliked for life, I defied my in-laws and persuaded my husband to continue with the twin pregnancy. As expected, my body couldn't handle the stress, and I was admitted for management by the 5th month of pregnancy, and I couldn't leave the hospital until I gave birth. During the hospital stay, neither my family nor my in-laws visited, only my husband came every weekend. He would bring me sweets and books I liked and we'd chat about trivial things. The managed hospitalization was tough and scary, but I could endure it because my husband was by my side. Then, as soon as I reached full term, I had a cesarean section. 2 energetic but petite girls, Sophia and Harper, were born safely. Holding their tiny bodies with my husband, tears of happiness and relief spilled over. However, childbirth wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. The terror of raising twins was about to start. Born a bit before their due date, Sophia and Harper slept well until about 2 weeks after birth. But then, they started crying mercilessly, whether early in the morning or in the dead of night. While I was nursing one, the other would cry, and while I was changing one's diaper, the other would overflow hers. The dizzying busyness and the tension of having these little lives in my hands drove me progressively neurotic. My husband was supportive, but he worked at a company without paternity leave, so he could only help on weekends or at night. After exhausting days at work, he too was growing haggard from soothing the twins and had dark circles under his eyes every day. It was a situation where I couldn't ask for more help. I couldn't rely on my family either. In fact, when my parents found out at 7 months pregnant that the babies were twin girls, they blatantly grimaced and said, "You've married into a family expecting a firstborn son and you produce 2 girls? Shameful. Get them out and try for a boy." I was blindsided by these cruel words from my family, who had initially rejoiced at the twin pregnancy. And all because of gender. As I turned pale and fell silent, my mother admonished me in a painfully kind voice.
You know, when I had you, your grandmother was relentless. Grandma?
My paternal grandmother had died when I was 1 year old, so I had no memory of her. I wonder if I was born while being blamed by a grandmother whose face I can't even recall. Then why did you decide to have me?
Well, we were planning to have another child right away. It never happened, but the grandmother passed soon after, so it was no issue.
I see.
Don't get it wrong. I'm just worried about you, Mia. Your mother-in-law looks like she'll live a long while, and if you want to be favored, you'd better get pregnant again soon. Twin girls, they'll never accept them.
I didn't want to believe this surreal confession from my parents, but it seemed to be their true feelings. They thought this birth was pointless because the twins were girls, and after briefly visiting the next day to see the babies, they hadn't been in touch since. How could I ask for help with the twins from such a family? And as my mother said, if my in-laws despised the twin daughters, I couldn't rely on them either. After all, they had been against the birth of the twins. From the moment it was discovered the twins were girls, my husband was the only person I could trust. With nowhere to turn, the sleepless days continued, and both my husband and I became increasingly worn out. One morning, right after my husband had gone to work, the doorbell rang. Thinking maybe he forgot something, I opened the door, but two unexpected figures were standing there. Looking so gloomy first thing in the morning. You're making it dreary over here too.
Oh, mother-in-law, sister-in-law?
Standing in the sparkling morning sun with scowling faces were my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. Pushing past me in shock, they made their way into the room.
What's going on?
It's obvious, isn't it?
You hardly ever bring the grandkids over, so I came to give my daughter-in-law a hard time. Eh?
Intimidated by my mother-in-law's stern tone, I felt the blood drain from my face.
I'm sorry. I've been so overwhelmed with parenting, I just haven't been able to cope.
That's right.
Eek!
Startled by my sister-in-law's loud voice, I let out a scream. My mother-in-law glanced around the room and kitchen and sighed.
This place is a mess, and the fridge is empty too. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry.
Why are you apologizing?
I'm sorry.
Watching me panic, my sister-in-law sighed too.
Where are the babies?
Wah! Before I could answer, cries from the newborns echoed from the bedroom. After gently picking up my daughters, my sister-in-law threw me into the bedroom, saying, "Useless daughter-in-law, just sleep in here," and slammed the door. Sitting dumbfounded in the now quiet bedroom, I didn't know what to do. Too exhausted to even grasp the situation, I couldn't decide whether to leave the room to get my daughters back or to just stay put. As I sat there bewildered, the crying faded, and the bedroom was enveloped in silence. In the suddenly quiet and empty space, I eventually fell asleep as if passing out. Waking up to the light streaming in through the west-facing window, I couldn't tell if it was morning or evening. After looking around the bedroom, my heart skipped a beat upon noticing the empty cribs. In a rush, I opened the door and there were my sister-in-law feeding the twins milk and my mother-in-law chopping vegetables in the kitchen. Seeing me bewildered, my mother-in-law scowled. "You've slept well, haven't you?"
I'm sorry.
"Why are you apologizing?"
That's a good thing.
Eh?
Go wash your face and sit down quickly. I've prepared some food.
Yes. As directed by my mother-in-law, I freshened up quickly and sat down at the dining chair. Immediately, she served steaming beef salad and bread. Among them were ingredients that hadn't been in our fridge. Drawn to the meal, I picked up a fork and tasted the potatoes. The warm, somewhat nostalgic flavor slowly warmed me up.
It's delicious.
That's good. My mother-in-law's gruff side profile seemed somehow pleased. My sister-in-law, Maya, also looked at the twins with a gentle face.
I just went ahead and gave them the milk that was here. Thank you. Breast milk is good, but it's handy to get them used to formula too. That way, you can leave them with someone else.
My vague response earned me a sharp glance from Maya.
That means you should rely on us when things get tough.
Got it.
I'm sorry.
There's no need to apologize. Maya sighed as I shrank back apologetically. Sorry, it's our fault for being so harsh.
Eh?
Maya scratched her head, and my mother-in-law frowned. Just then, my husband, James, came home. He was surprised to see his mother and sister here, but he sighed in relief when he realized the situation wasn't bad.
Mia, sorry to scare you. Mom and Maya were really worried we might collapse. They couldn't stand it anymore.
Eh? I was taken aback by James' revelation. My mother-in-law and Maya awkwardly looked away. It seemed they had been concerned for me ever since I got pregnant with the twins. Their opposition to the pregnancy was out of genuine concern for my life. It must have scared them, the thought of little me giving birth to twins. Their absence during the visitation was due to their fear that stress from a scary mother-in-law or sister-in-law might raise my blood pressure. They were aware of their harsh and intimidating demeanor. But the items James brought during the visitation were all carefully chosen by my mother-in-law and Maya to support my efforts. Now that I think about it, there were many fancy sweets that didn't seem like something James would pick. During the pregnancy, they were praying for a safe delivery. When the twins were born safely, they were overjoyed but didn't have the courage to visit because they had insisted I give up the children. However, they felt our crisis from the weary sound of James' voice over the phone updates and rushed over. My mother-in-law and Maya were just awkward, but kind people who cared about others. Unbeknownst to me, I had always been loved and protected by them. Since the pregnancy, I had been too overwhelmed to notice.
Do you really accept these girls, even though I couldn't have a boy? A boy? It doesn't matter if it's a boy or a girl, as long as they're healthy. Aren't you a woman too?
Maya swiftly dismissed the fears I had been carrying alone.
There's something I want to talk about, Mia. Actually, Mom hasn't held the babies yet. Eh?
Wait, Maya!
She said she doesn't deserve to hold them after insisting they shouldn't live.
Mom. James looked sadly at his mother. My mother-in-law frowned and looked down. That sight made the back of my eyes heat up. She was feeling much deeper regret than I had thought. Regret for having told me to give up on the twins. Even though it was to protect my life. I stood up from my chair and took my daughters from my sister-in-law, Maya. Please, hold them.
But.
Please. As I asked, my mother-in-law hesitantly reached out her hands. Her large hands, trembling slightly, enveloped the tiny body.
Oh, they're warm.
Yes, they are.
They're alive.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
My mother-in-law gripped my daughter's tiny hand.
Thank you for being born.
Tears naturally spilled from my eyes as I heard her trembling voice. I felt regret. I had assumed rejection and had kept my distance. Because of that, I had nearly ruined everything. I finally realized how important it is to rely on someone, not just for myself or my children, but also for the kind people who care about me. After that, I gradually began to rely more on my in-laws. When my father-in-law first held my daughters, he cried and apologized. Everyone was genuinely concerned about my health. There was no one here who blamed me for having my daughters. Maya, already a mother to 2 boys, became a great mentor and advisor. My in-laws doted on the girls to the point of spoiling them, buying them anything and everything if left unchecked. Though still sharp-tongued, my mother-in-law and Maya are professionals who battle in a male-dominated workplace, so it can't be helped. If I thought of them as tsundere, they even seemed endearing. I'm still chased out of the kitchen at my in-laws' house because they're worried I might get hurt. It's their awkward way of showing care. When they told me I was cute but might be stepped on like a little mouse, I felt oddly about it. Then, when the twins were 6 months old. Though raising them was still tough, I had started to find a little more ease thanks to my in-laws' help. I decided to celebrate their half-birthday and invited my in-laws. Of course, I invited my in-laws, but since my mother-in-law suggested, "Why don't you also invite your parents?" out of consideration, I decided to invite my parents as well. I hesitated to meet my parents, but I didn't want to waste my in-laws' thoughtfulness, and deep down, I still wanted to believe in my parents. Maybe the harsh words they had said were just my misinterpretation. However, I would find out that this wish was mistaken. On the day of the celebration, my mother-in-law and Maya catered the food and gave the girls matching outfits. My father-in-law was utterly smitten, taking turns holding each daughter. Yet, my parents showed up empty-handed, gorged on the food, and showed no interest in holding the girls. Toward the end of the party, my father made an unbelievable comment.
"So, when are you planning to get pregnant again?" "What?"
The room's atmosphere froze. I was bewildered by my father's bombshell statement, but desperately tried to cover for it.
"Dad, listen. I'm already overwhelmed with taking care of the girls. Besides, getting pregnant within a year of giving birth can put a lot of strain on the mother's body. But it's not impossible, right? If you keep dawdling, you'll be 40 before you know it. For James' sake too, you need to hurry up and have a son to fulfill your duty as a wife."
My husband, James, scowled at my father's words.
"I don't mind whether it's a boy or a girl. Come on, you're running a company, that can't be true."
Thinking it was modesty. My father laughed crudely.
"Right?"
My mother just nodded along beside him. "Ah, I see. My parents really do despise me for not being able to have a boy." My husband supported my shoulder to reassure me as I paled and froze.
"Father-in-law, Mia endured a difficult pregnancy and risked her life to give us our beautiful daughters. Neither my parents nor I could ask for anything more. James."
Tears welled up as I looked at the firm profile of my husband asserting this. But my parents responded with a sinister smile to my husband.
"James, a man needs to be more greedy. Your sister will take over." "What?" "Your sister has 2 boys, right? If you want to take over the company and the inheritance, you need to think more about having a male heir."
Not just my husband and I, but also my in-laws and sister-in-law's expressions turned pale. That's when I finally understood. My parents' obsession with having a boy wasn't because they were worried about me being mistreated by my husband's family. They were hoping that my husband would take over the family business. And they were aiming for the child I bore, my parents' grandchildren, to inherit it. And at this rate, they probably hoped to benefit themselves by having me as the CEO's wife and their grandchild as the heir. Perhaps they favored my marriage because my in-laws owned a business. I could feel my hands getting colder from the shock. As everyone remained silent at my father's outrageous remarks, he dropped another bombshell, emboldened.
"If the twins are a bother, I have just the right person. A colleague at work is looking to adopt because his wife can't have children." "What?"
My mother-in-law and sister-in-law, who had been silent up until now, glared fiercely at my father.
"You're suggesting putting Sophia and Harper up for adoption?"
My mother-in-law's voice boomed as if from the depths of the earth.
"Yes. You wanted a male grandchild, didn't you? Sorry for having such an incompetent daughter. If we get rid of the twins, I'll make sure she has a healthy boy right away." "We don't want that." "So, you agree, what?" "No, thank you."
My father, convinced he would receive agreement, looked stunned as he noticed my in-laws and sister-in-law, Maya, looking furious. He flinched as he felt their gaze.
"To suggest casting out babies is a devil's deed. How can you speak so boldly in front of those babies and their parents, you beast?"
My mother-in-law chastised him without hiding her disgust.
But, without a male grandchild, it's your family that would suffer." "We are not suffering at all. As long as my son and his family and grandchildren are happy and healthy, the gender does not matter." "But..." "Be quiet!" "Eek!"
My parents cringed like frightened frogs under the commanding presence of my mother-in-law. My father-in-law, towering over 6 feet, stood up and looked down coldly at my petite parents.
"Today is a day to celebrate our grandchildren's lively half-year, not a venue for spilling your desires. If you lack shame and common sense, please leave." But... "Mia!"
My mother looked at me pleadingly. "Do you think I'm going to cover for you, after you suggest abandoning my precious daughters? Ridiculous." Shaking with shock and anger, I managed to restrain my urge to scream and squeezed out my words.
"Go home. There's no way we're letting go of our daughters. Mia, we were just worried about your position. Leave. Eek.
Maya brandished the knife she brought for cutting the cake with a demonic expression. My parents scurried out of the house like their backs were broken. In the silence that followed the storm, only Sophia's voice could be heard.
I'm so sorry for my parents' rude remarks.
I apologized to my in-laws and Maya. I had so much to say, yet no more words came out. Then, my mother-in-law's large hand warmly enveloped my chilled hands.
Mia, we are just grateful that the grandchildren were born healthy and you were safe. We're actually just thankful that you gave us 2 beautiful granddaughters at once. Mother-in-law. Of course, if you still want more children, we will support you. But we don't want you to go through that just to have more. More than anything, we want you to take care of yourself for your daughter's sake. Did you understand our feelings?
Yes. Tears spilled from my eyes, moved by her warm hand and words. I was shocked and couldn't forgive my parents. But more than that, I was overjoyed and relieved to be with these people who genuinely cared about my well-being and loved my daughters.
Well, now that the troublemakers are gone, let's start over. Cake for the adults, strawberries for the kids.
Maya said, placing a large cake in front of me. Clearly twice the size of what was in front of my husband, James.
Your favoritism is too obvious. Of course. Mia is doing her best every day with her first-time parenting. And since I'm raising my 3-year-old little boy, I need this much too. Oh boy!
James chuckled as Maya cut an equally large piece of cake for herself. I sighed with relief as the dining table returned to its usual atmosphere. It's okay, even if my parents are the worst, I have allies on my side. No matter what my parents say, I will absolutely protect my daughters. As I watched my daughters happily eating strawberries in the arms of my husband and father-in-law, I quietly vowed to myself. After that, my parents didn't attempt to contact us again, and just when I thought they had given up on having a male grandchild, an incident occurred. One leisurely weekend afternoon. As I was relaxing with my husband and children, our house intercom rang. The monitor showed an unfamiliar man and woman. While feeling suspicious, I opened the door, and they explained their visit with a smile.
We heard from the manager that we could receive the twin babies. What? What?
Seeing our stunned faces, they too looked bewildered. After hearing them out at the entrance, I felt so angry I thought my blood vessels might burst. This manager they referred to was my father. And they were the couple my father had recently talked about wanting to adopt. Essentially, my father had been pushing forward with a plan to give away my children without my consent. I calmly explained the situation to them while containing my anger. The couple was appalled upon hearing about my father's misdeeds. Apparently, they were told by my father, who had tearfully claimed, "My daughter's body is too weak to raise twin babies."
In reality, right after I gave birth to the twins, he was already ordering me to have a boy.
I revealed bitterly. The couple's faces turned expressionless upon hearing this. Fortunately, they were reasonable and left soon after offering me sympathetic words. Immediately after the couple left, I explained the situation to my husband, who had been watching the children in the living room. He looked so furious, it seemed he might scare off even a demon. Unforgivable. That such people could be my biological parents. I wanted to storm into my parents' house and scream at them, but I restrained myself. There were other things to do now. I confirmed something important with my husband. A week after the subordinate's visit, my parents stormed in yelling.
Why did you turn away my subordinate? What do you mean why? I told you, I'm not putting the twins up for adoption. I was thinking about your position. And yet, you repay me like this. Like this?
Indeed, I had hurled many insults in my mind, but since I hadn't acted on them, I felt confused. However, my father, red-faced, started ranting uncontrollably. It turned out that the subordinate, deceived by my father into thinking he could adopt the twins, exposed my father's cruel actions to others. The community, especially those with children, was appalled. They reported it to the company's CEO, a man who adores his grandchildren so much he uses their photos as his smartphone wallpaper. The president was so furious, his hair nearly stood on end. It seems that lecturing my father for half a day wasn't enough. He was also subtly ridiculed in front of everyone during the morning assembly. In our small town's small company, it didn't take long for my father's actions to become known to all employees. His cruelty spread from the employees' families to the neighbors, and whispers began that my parents were demons who sacrificed twins to make their daughter have a son.
I thought you would feel out of place in their family if you didn't have a boy. And yet, you repay me like this. Are you still saying that? My mother-in-law and father-in-law have already told you that it's fine even if it's not a boy. You're naive. To secure our family's future, we need a boy who can take over after James.
My mother gnawed her nails bitterly. Shouldn't a parent who truly cares about their daughter value her life more than money or social standing? Well, explaining this to these money-blinded people probably wouldn't make a difference. Instead, I decided to hit them where it hurt most by telling them a truth that would impact them the most.
James isn't going to take over the family business. What? The successor to that company is my sister-in-law. What?
My revelation nearly knocked my parents off their feet.
How could that be? The father-in-law would never allow a woman to take over. It doesn't matter what he allows or not, the company belongs to my mom. What?
Now, both parents really did look like they might collapse. Yes, the president of the family business isn't my father-in-law but my mother-in-law. Anyone who looked at the company's website would realize that the CEO's name is the mother-in-law, but these two, stuck in their delusions, had never noticed. The one studying to take over and working at the family business is my sister-in-law. My husband works in a completely different sector. I did check with him just in case, but he has no interest in the family business and wants to continue pursuing his career at his current company.
That means I will never become the company CEO's wife.
Never.
That can't be. That can't be.
My parents turned paler than white. My mother covered her face with her hands in lament.
I bragged to all our relatives that you would become the company CEO's wife. Oh, what are we going to do now?
Like I care.
Portia.
Portia? My father gasped.
I thought you would become wealthy, so I thought I didn't need to save for retirement. I've always dreamed of a Porsche. And I just ordered a kitchen remodel.
Ah. To think these are my parents.
You'll just have to work hard and save money again. That's too much, too much.
As my parents trembled in despair, my husband gently took them by the collar and escorted them out. Thus, at 56, my parents found themselves in a predicament, needing to save for retirement again. Despite this, due to the inhumane acts they had committed towards me and my daughters, and unable to withstand the cold social pressure, my father resigned as if fleeing. He wasn't prepared to fire, which is financial independence, retire early. On the contrary, he had squandered the savings hoping for the wealth I would acquire, and was even in debt. My mother had been a homemaker for 36 years since my birth. Far from being able to live peacefully in retirement, their current financial situation was precarious, and they found themselves unable to secure employment anywhere. Then, they resorted to calling my mother-in-law, pleading through tears for her to hire them at her company, but she firmly refused, saying that they don't accept people with such outdated, misogynistic views. There were times I felt down due to the shame of my parents' actions, but my husband and in-laws kept my spirits up by constantly buying me my favorite snacks and foods. The new family that had accepted me was so warm and kind. The twins were thriving and always shared lovely smiles. Every time I felt proud of myself for protecting these lives, I grew stronger. Even if my parents were disgraceful, I was okay in this gentle, sunlit place. I was sure of it. Half a year later.
Dad.
Did you hear that? Sophia just called me Dad, didn't she?
No, that was Dada. That means Granddad, right, Sophia? Yes, Sophia is hungry. Look, Mom has made some delicious food. Nanny. Wait, did she just say nanny? Yes.
While the grandparents and my husband chuckled, my sister-in-law casually responded while focusing on decorating. The once intimidating in-laws were now completely doting over the grandchildren. Today was the twins' first birthday. And it was especially lively with my sister-in-law's family visiting. I made a yogurt cake that even babies could eat, which I found the recipe for online. I spread strained yogurt on pancakes, attached finger biscuits around, and topped it with strawberries and a one candle.
You're so lucky to get such a cute cake made for you.
My sister-in-law teased Harper, who giggled in response. Sophia leaned out of my husband's arms, almost grabbing the cake. Being a part of such an overly joyful scene filled me with deep emotion. Maybe I'll want another baby soon, and who knows, it might be a boy. But my husband and in-laws will love my children regardless of gender. I am confident that my life, having met such a family, will continue to be wonderful.